We have decanters at home, and it's got the Bullet, it's got another whiskey, and then I've got like an Irish whiskey that's in there. So last night we were just hanging out on the couch, and my wife's like, "Do you want some whiskey?" I'm like, "All right, sure." She just kind of, I don't know what's what. So she poured me a cup of something. I was like, "This is Irish." I wasn't prepared for it. I'm just like, "Okay, it's going down." Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Longley's Line Podcast. I am your host, Stephen Longley. Remember to like, follow, subscribe on all of our social medias. Stephen Longley for me, Longley's Line for the show, Lightstyle Studio for our studio here. And as you guys know, we've been doing this for a hot minute, and before we moved to video, we had just audio. And one of the guests that we had on the just audio was my guest to my left here, Mr. Anthony Carter. But today, now that we're on video, we've got the duo here, Mr. Anthony and Felicia. So thank you guys for being here.
Thank you.
Appreciate you guys coming down.
For inviting us back. Absolutely.
Before we get started on anything, go ahead and promote the social medias, where you want anybody to find you, things like that, so we can get that from the jump.
All right. So we own a studio here in town, MasterPeace Studio, and that's Instagram is at MasterPeace.studio. And then we also have our own personal pages. So hi Felicia, but it's like __ hi Felicia __. You know, instead of like the whole by Felicia.
We'll have it down there.
And then he has like 10 million Neon Babylon accounts right now.
Oh yeah, I've gotten hacked quite a bit. So
really?
So if you go to neonbabylon.rno, that's me. If it's like any _. Eon, it's just a bunch of weird ones. There's probably like 6 of them now, and I don't know how to stop it. So hopefully you guys find the right one.
Yeah. We'll get the right one, not one that's just bots.
Yeah, because even I've fallen for it too. I'm like, oh, that's nice. And I'm like, why did he repost it? And I'm like, darn it, it's not his.
It's not. Report, dang it.
Yeah, I tried, but they don't do anything.
Yeah,
it says it doesn't go against their guidelines. I'm like, but it's not me.
Yeah.
But okay.
Isn't this supposed to be me? That's against my guidelines.
Yeah, right.
Come on, what are we doing here?
It is what it is. It is what it is.
So, one of the things that I like to ask, where are you guys from originally?
You want to go first or me?
Sure. So originally I am from the Bay Area. So it's probably like blasphemous that I'm wearing an LA hat.
I was gonna say I didn't want to say it. But.
Yeah. It's a long story, but originally from the Bay Area, moved here when I was very young, like 9 or 10. And kind of traveled around after high school, went to Vegas, went back to the Bay Area, came back to Reno, and it just was those 3 regions for, 38 years. So, but officially became a Reno resident at 9 years old.
It seems like those 3 areas are kind of the big ones for everything, like how the athletics now are in the Bay, and they are moving to Vegas.
Yeah.
But while they're working on the Coliseum and stuff, they may play in Reno.
Yeah.
So it's just so for the LA thing, I'm an A's fan. So my dad sent me that, and I'm just like, we can watch the A's play.
Nice.
But where are they gonna play?
They would
At
play
the
at Aces Stadium.
Where would they play?
Well, I'm like, it's the A's, but that's
a
wow.
legit stadium, I think.
It is.
It's nice. It's cool. And then having a major league team would be awesome.
Yeah.
But then it's also we're the worst in the MLB, so it's pretty much like watching a minor league. It's tough right
The
now.
Raiders have been the Raiders, and Oakland had diehard fans.
Yeah.
That's it. I think if Reno had any professional teams, they would get support.
Yeah.
Whether if they went 0 and 162, we would still show up to the games.
We would be Browns fans.
Exactly. You know what I mean?
We're there supporting.
Yeah, like I would love to have some type of professional team here because Vegas is getting everything now.
Yeah.
Everything.
And we're just a smaller one. And where are you from originally?
I'm from Reno, Nevada.
What part of
Born
town?
and raised. I was primarily raised in Sparks.
Okay.
Sparks.
What part of Sparks?
What part of Sparks? Sullivan Lane.
Okay.
Which I think is actually pretty nearby.
Yeah.
Are we on Sullivan Lane?
Yeah.
I used to live at the Stonegate Apartments on Sullivan Lane. And then we moved out to like Sun Valley and I went to
Okay.
Spanish Springs.
That's where I went to.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
What year?
11 was when I
You
graduated.
graduated? Okay.
Because we
I
moved out here
graduated
when
2017. No, when did I
Did you
graduate?
say 2017?
Oh my gosh, I graduated in
2017?
2007.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm old.
Okay. That's all right.
that's when my wife graduated too, so she does the same thing. She's like, "You were 11?"
Oh my gosh.
Because I started high school in 07. So
Oh,
it was that
okay.
same. But when we moved here, we moved to Spanish Springs, and it was when the high school was being built. So we lived like right down the
Oh.
street, and I got to see it be built and everything, and then we ended up
Interesting.
going there.
Okay.
And I liked it out there. It was
Yeah.
it's completely different. If you haven't been out there recently, it is complete. They have a Winco
It's
now.
way far.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I've
It's
heard
wild.
that Winco's nice though.
It's
The
really
Winco
nice.
over here is
Not nice.
not so nice.
Love Winco 24/7, but that also
Yep.
brings
Mm-hmm.
brings a little something bad to
You
it.
get a 24/7 crowd.
Yeah.
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 You get the ones, it's 2 a.m. I just want some Chinese food. You know? It's
But
good
I would
morning.
also be there at 2 a.m.
I've
I don't know,
done it.
oddly enough, because of my parents' schedule, they worked really late, or we had to pick up my mom at like 1 in the morning. So we'd always pick her up and then go to Winco.
Yeah.
But I think it was called Bear Cubs Foods.
Wow.
Do you remember that?
That is old
Bear
school.
Cubs?
Like when
Foods?
Save Mart used to be Albertsons.
Jesus, man.
Albertsons.
That's
Is there
right.
an Albertsons anymore?
They don't
I
have
think
it
so, yeah.
here, but there's actually still one out in Elko. I've got family that's out there, so whenever I go visit them, I look and just see the big A. I'm like, Albertsons?
Whoa.
It's like seeing a Kmart.
I
somewhere.
know. Oh gosh, Kmart.
You never see any of
All
those
older
anymore.
stores.
Yeah.
All of the kids are like,
Bear
what are
Cub
they
foods.
talking about?
Yeah.
It doesn't-
Right.
It's Save Mart and 7-Eleven. I don't know what you're talking about.
That's funny.
So, you guys are here. What happened like after high school? Did you have any? Did you know what you wanted to do? Did you have any kind of
Oh,
things in mind when you
jeez.
were done?
I'll let you
For
start.
me, I was a lost little girl. No, I did go into college, so I did like community college. I originally wanted to be a police officer. That was my
Okay.
passion, and more than being a police officer, I actually wanted to work with homicide, like doing investigations. I was
Like detective
obsessed with like
style?
detective work. But when I was doing the courses, I ended up going to like the Sparks PD and just kind of asking questions. And then I found out that in order to be in like a detective position, those are like retirement positions. So unless
Yeah.
you retire or die, it's like you can be a regular police officer for years. And I was like, well, let me try out like security just to kind of test my
Yeah, get your foot in the
my
door a little.
personality, you know, and I'm extremely like hot-headed. And I was like, oh, me and a gun? No, this is not going to work out.
Did you steal those earrings? Get
I
back here!
know, right?
Right.
I was just like always yelling. I'm like, people don't listen. I'm like, I don't think I could do this. But that kind of crushed my dreams a little bit because I still liked the homicide investigating portion. But I don't think I could have been a police officer.
Yeah, because that's definitely a tough field. Just
Oh,
dealing
yeah,
with the
absolutely.
crazies all the time. Like we just talked about, you have to be a Winco every other day because there's crazies walking around. You know, and no
And-
shade on Winco. We
And
love
this
you.
is, yes, thank you, Winko. But this is before, you know, I was with Anthony too, so I thought I was going to be the single, you know, person, independent woman, like the whole Sandra Bullock character, like
Yeah.
just doing her own thing.
Character.
And then that didn't happen because clearly I'm with my husband and we have a beautiful son.
My wife said the
But-
same thing. She was like, I was ready to take me and my daughter. We were going to get a nice house, and then you showed up.
I know,
And look at where we are now.
I know.
Happy?
Yes.
Yeah, right.
She was like, I'm no longer single and independent. I make you do things for me. I'm like, yeah, that's why I'm here. That's why I'm here.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
But after that dream kind of went down, I just ended up going into logistics. So that's where my career is at now, aside from having the studio. I'm actually a training and development manager. So I
Okay.
live like a double life. I have like my corporate life and then, you know, my studio creative life.
Yeah.
But outside of that, you know, we went to Vegas together, so I experienced that, did the nightlife. And that's when we first experienced like our entrepreneurship, because we ended up starting a meal prep business down there. It was called Simple Meals by Fee. And it took off unexpectedly, but I hated it. I'd be like in the kitchen sometimes just crying and like, I can't do this. You know, it's hard work. Like
Yeah.
all the catering, all that cooking, like there's a lot of work that gets put into
And
the
then you
food
have
industry.
customers with specifications, because we were dealing with like legitimate like bodybuilders, NPC competitors, and all that. And you know, like
eat.
if they need 6 ounces, it can't be 5.8. It can't be 6.2. Like literally, it was like I just weighed it. This is 5.8. Like, can you? I need my other point. And it's
Yeah.
like, yo, are you kidding me? But yeah, it was very like strenuous on the body,
Yeah.
on the mind,
A lot of
and
late hours.
So
we were doing,
meticulous.
and we were talking about. It literally took a month before it was like almost out of control.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And so we had a friend that did personal training with us when we first moved out there, and I kind of like forcibly nudged Felicia into it because he was like, "Man, if you guys like will make my food for me, I'll train you for free, right?" And so I was like, "Yeah, Felicia will do it, like no problem." You know what I mean? I'm like, she's an amazing cook. Like she does
Yeah.
it for us at home. You know?
Just
All
honey,
thanks
yeah.
to Instagram, because I post, you know, everybody's into posting their food. So
Yeah.
I posted my meal prep. And
Yeah.
everyone's like, oh, that looks so good.
It looks
Yeah.
amazing.
And so then
yeah.
our trainer started giving them to his clients, and then I remember, I think it was April 15th, and so like we got a text and it was like, "Hey, I'm interested in like ordering food," and I like looked at the phone, I was like, "Who the hell is this?" And then I was like, "Yo, somebody's asking for food," and then like we had one client, and then it was 5, and then before we knew it, it was like 30 consistent people. But that's 30 people ordering between 5 to 10 different meals. And
Every
so,
week.
yeah, and that's also 30 different deliveries that we have to do all
Right.
over Vegas.
Yeah.
And Vegas is not like Reno, for anybody that doesn't know. Like, Vegas is like literally 5 little cities that they just call Vegas.
Yeah,
You
it's
know what
not
I mean?
just the Strip.
Yeah, like it takes an hour sometimes to get from Vegas to Vegas.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So like we were literally going all over the city, and it just got to a point where it was like we're still making money, but like we are miserable.
Sure, yeah.
You don't want to keep doing this. You know what I mean? You get tired of shopping. You get tired of cooking. You get tired of like just running all over the city. And it was kind of like, all right, let's be done with this. You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I honestly think if we would have stuck with it, we would still be down there doing that and still
Yeah.
making money. But we would have hated every minute of it.
Yeah.
You know what
Yeah.
I mean? So
And that's the thing, too. Like, if you have a business or you're working for yourself, like, it's so important that you actually enjoy what you're doing, because then it just feels like any other job. You know what I mean? So
you're doing it for yourself, so
Exactly.
you have to make sure
that you
it's
love
what
doing
you want
it
to
and
do.
you're doing it every
Then
day.
you look at a piece of chicken, you're like, I hate chicken
Oh
so
my!
much.
Listen, man. Like, but I will say now that we can basically cook with our eyes closed. Like, so whenever there's like a family
a master
barbecue,
griller
like
now.
it's always just assumed that I'm going to cook. Like,
Right.
And I'm like, so am I supposed to be doing this? And
I
it's
have
like,
to do this?
yeah, but it's like
They, like, buy all the food and
it's
it
one
just
of those
waits
like
there.
you reluctantly you're like, but then you're like actually love doing it.
Yeah.
Because like it's personal now. Like, and I don't mind cooking for the 7 people.
Yeah.
Versus cooking for 30 people and doing it 150 times. So like I do like the fact that it's like cooking is like nothing.
It's like, yeah, Anthony is going to be cooking. Fine, I don't
Yeah,
want to.
right,
Your apron's
like-
already on.
And
Like,
then you
God,
have
I
to
guess.
like-
I like break out like my toolkit or whatever. Like,
God, I
it's
didn't
all,
even
like,
know I was
shiny.
going to do this.
Yeah, right.
He had it ready.
So yeah, no, definitely learned a lot from that, personally, professionally.
Yeah.
all of that.
It gives you a look into what running your own business is going to be and when it thrives.
Absolutely.
Chaos.
Yeah.
And so that and that was, I guess, my second business. So after high school, my immediate thought was I got to get out of here.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because I graduated not in 07. I'm not going to age myself, but it was the things that you see in Reno now. They were not there
Yeah.
when I was in high school, when I graduated. and it was very much, you just kind of felt like you were on an island everywhere you went, you know, for me and my circle of friends anyway. And so the thought was just like, we're getting out of here. And what does most Reno kids do? They either go to Oregon or they go to Vegas. Like, you know what I mean? Like, those are kind of like the two places they go. You know what I mean? So, so I ended up going to UNLV, but I almost ended up going to school in the South because I was like, I just need a complete reversal of what I have been dealing with in Reno for the past 10 years. And I was like, I'm going to go to New Orleans. I'm going to go to Mississippi. And then I got there and I was like, I'm not going to any of these places. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
I'll visit.
It was like, I think I would have enjoyed going to school, but it was such a culture shock in terms of like being that far away from my family. I thought I was going to be okay with it. But then when I got there and I thought about it, I was like, I'm not ready to be that far from my mom and sister and all that stuff like that. So I ended up going to Vegas and I went to UNLV, studied marketing and management, and had an opportunity to open up a retail shop. And this was like very, very early days of streetwear. And Vegas didn't have like a quote unquote streetwear scene. So we were like, yo, let's start something here, you know? Dropped out of high school, dropped out of college, dropped out of high school. I forgot to tell you, I dropped out of high school.
By the way.
Yeah, by the way. So I dropped out my junior year because I was like, well, I'm going to school for marketing and management, and I am learning nothing in these classes.
Yeah.
Like, it was just like, what did Coca-Cola do, and what did Walmart do? And I'm like, I don't care. You know what I mean? Like, it's literally like you're talking about these billion-dollar industries that like started with infrastructure. Like, I'm like, where's the small business class? And since then, there's been a lot more like entrepreneurial, small business focused stuff. But like when I was going to UNLV, like that wasn't
They're talking
the
corporations.
thing. Exactly, right? And so I was like, this is like mind-numbingly not interesting, you know? And then that first year of business, I learned more from doing it than I learned in 3 years at UNLV. Yeah. However, looking back, I do wish I would have just stayed that extra year and just graduated. Just, you know what I mean? Yeah. But I was like, nope, this is it. This is my path. And I think that if I hadn't done that, we probably don't do Simple Mills, or we probably don't do the studio. And I got a chance to work some of that stuff out with a friend of mine very early on. Like, we were 20 years old. We had no business like running a retail shop. You know what I mean? But
still kids at that time.
You know what I mean? Like, and I look back and I'm like, God, like, we messed up. Like, you know what I mean? Like, we weren't listening to advice. Like, you know, we have family being like, you should do this. And we're like, what do you know? Like, you're old.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, and it's like, we should have did that.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. We should have had accounting software. Like, you know what I mean? Back. Like, we should know how much we make every day. Like, and it's just stuff like that. Like, you don't think about when you're 20 years old.
You're just happy that the money's rolling in.
Absolutely.
You're like, oh, this is great.
Absolutely. And that was my thought process, was get out of Reno, go somewhere else where it just feels like there's just more things going on, right? But I ended up back in Reno, and that's where Felicia and I met. And at that point, like, she had been here. She hadn't left Reno. So it was like, let's go to Vegas. And I'm like, all right, cool. Like, I already know the landscape. You know what I mean?
The same thing where I'm ready to get out of here.
Exactly. So we went back down, and then that's when Simple Mills started. And what brought us back up here was the fact that we had a son. And we had discussed, like, you know, even though there were things about Reno that we didn't necessarily like, we were like, it wouldn't be so bad to raise a child here just because it's quiet.
Yeah.
And mind you, this was Reno now is like, I don't know what's
happening.
happening. Like, you know what I mean? But like then, before, he's 5 now, about to turn 6 in March. But, you know, 7 years ago, we're like, oh, Reno's quiet. Like, just raise your family, you know, type stuff. Yeah. So when we had a kid, it was like, yeah, let's go back to Reno, you know? And that's how we ended up back here.
Yeah. I get that completely, because I did the same kind of thing. I moved to Montana at one point because a couple of buddies, they were like, oh, we have a friend that lives out in Montana, and he's got jobs for us. And we're like, let's go. So 3 guys, 2 dogs, all of our stuff in a tiny Suzuki in February.
Wow.
Decide, let's go to Montana. So we go up there, make a whole trip. We visit family all the way through, get to Montana. He didn't answer his phone the first 2 days, so we slept in the car. Finally answered the phone, said, "Oh, I gave those jobs away." Cool. So we have to look for jobs. I end up working at the mall for the overnight shift. And we're in his cousin's place that he lets us stay in. And then at one point, while we're there for maybe a month, he goes, "Oh, you guys have to leave." "Why?" "The landlord saw that you guys have dogs and said we can't have roommates or dogs." He was like, "We told you we've been coming up for months now." So then they end up kicking us out. Thankfully, all of our tax returns hit, so we have money. So then we go, I think it's just time to move back. But then it also worked out because by that time we're coming back. I'm like, I don't know what I want to do for a living. I'm 20, 21 at that time. I'm like, I don't know what I want to do.
Right.
So then I think I like being in front of the camera. Every time we did projects in high school or something, someone would be like, "Hey, can you be in my video?" "Of course I can." I'm like, "Yeah, I'll be in front of the camera. I don't care." So then I got in touch with photographer friends, and they were like, "There's not a lot of males that do get their photos taken. There's not a lot of male models around." So he's like, "You should try it." And then it ended up snowballing. Like, "Oh, I'll try that." And then I also love performing, so I'll get in touch with trying to act and
Oh, nice.
everything kind of snowballed and went from there. So that's
cool.
Little bit of getting away is nice because then you kind of think either I'll stay here and do this or I'll come back and figure out what I want to do.
Right.
So then while you guys are back, what do you decide to do then? Is that when the Neon Babylon really started to
And
come
honestly,
up,
I think if we hadn't left Vegas, all of this wouldn't have happened.
Oh, not at all.
But Neon Babylon started, like, he was already thinking about what to do and working on designs when we were in Vegas. So that just kind of traveled.
So I never thought I would feel like this, but I was in Vegas and there was, like, parts of Reno that I missed. Because we would come back to visit and, like, I could see that Reno's, like, scene was, like, kind of burgeoning, and I was like, what is going on here? Like, you know what I mean? Like, this is not the Reno that I left. And it was like, I feel like there's something here, and I like something could be done. You could get in early. The same way that, my boy and I did, like, with streetwear in Vegas in 2006. It's like, there's not a lot of streetwear stores here. Like, we have an opportunity to get in early and kind of create a foothold, So that was kind of like the thought process. But we would come back, like, we would drive through, like, what is now Midtown, and I'd be like, what the hell is going on here? Like, you know what I mean? Like, they're, like, tearing down hotels and, like, building, like, nice apartments and all that. And we were just, like, looking around like, what happened? You know what I mean? And so, like, there were points where I'm like, Reno doesn't seem so bad, right? And so, the concept for Neon Babylon started in Vegas because I was like, oh, there's, like, parts of Reno that I miss or things that I appreciate now being away from it. And that's how that kind of came to be. Now, the idea for the studio came much later when we were here. So that probably didn't develop as a concept or an idea until, like, about a year after we were back. And, like, Neon became something, but, like, there was a point where I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. You know what I mean? Like, and she kept me going with it because, like, there was just frustrations, like, internally, creatively, like, there was just this things going on, and I was like, I am done with this. You know what I'm saying? Like, I tried it, sold a couple shirts, sold a couple hats, I'm out of here. Like, I did what I was supposed to do, But she encouraged me to be like, no, like, there's something else here. And so during my frustration of just, it was a creative frustration, not a financial thing with Neon Babylon. I have this problem with, like, starting multiple things in my brain. You know what I mean? And I'll write them down and I'll be like, hey, like, what do you think of this idea? And she's like, I like it. Like, what happened to the other 5 ideas that were, you know what I mean?
This one over here.
Like, my brainstorms happen in real time, and she's usually like, she is the pin board where I'm like, all right, here's this idea, here's this idea, here's this idea. You know what I mean? And so, like, like, because I was struggling internally with where to go with Neon Babylon, that's where MasterPeace came about. Because I was looking for just some type of like solace, because there was so much like internal struggle. Like, I started it with a friend of mine, and like we weren't kind of like getting along. Like, we've since kind of like rekindled and reconnected, but at the time it was like we were kind of like clashing.
Button
You know what
the
I
whole
mean?
time, yeah.
And so, yeah, that's where MasterPeace came from. That's where it came from in name, was because I was trying to create something else, because I just wanted to get back to like designing and comfort, and you know what I'm saying? Like, I missed my process, and so it was like, oh, I'm looking to create my masterpiece, but I'm also looking to like bring peace back within myself.
Yeah, have inner peace.
Exactly, right? And so that's why it's spelled like that, and that's where it came from. It was initially supposed to be a different clothing line, because everything I do starts with the clothing line first. It always goes back to clothing.
Yeah.
Every idea is like, all right, it's gonna be a T-shirt, and it's like, I had a friend of mine who's like, stop making T-shirts, dude. Like, all you do is make T-shirts. Stop making T-shirts, you know. But that's my go-to. That's where
Yeah.
I'm most comfortable, is creating garments, right? And so MasterPeace started as a clothing line, and I think with us talking and me just kind of like just thinking, it was like, no, what we're gonna do is we're gonna turn MasterPeace as an idea into like a physical location.
Yeah.
And it's not going to have any rhyme or reason. People aren't gonna know what you're. It's okay. And so, like, the concept for MasterPeace Studio was somewhere where we could engage with other like-minded creatives. Because again, that was something that I was feeling frustration with. Was like, I don't have anybody to talk to. Like, I can't bounce ideas off of people.
Yeah.
And I just remember, like, we moved to Sparks when we came back, and I had never lived in Sparks before, right? And I was just like, to me, like, Sparks was like, it's a giant ghetto. When I was growing up, I was like, who the hell is gonna go to Sparks?
Why am I
Like,
going there?
why would you go there?
There's
you know?
3 Wincos. What do we do?
Yeah, dude. I'm like, I am never, right? And so, like, and the idea came, I was like staring out, because at the time we were staying with her family, and I was in the room, and we were just like, I was looking out the window, and so the house is next to the Sparks Marina, and you look out at night, and there's nothing, right? And I'm just looking out at nothingness, and I was like, I think I got like depressed,
Sure.
and I was just like, what the hell are we doing here? Like, you know what I mean? And again, she talked me out of it, like, why don't you change that?
Yeah.
Like, we talk about what we don't like, so then why aren't we trying to change it, you know? So I come up with these ideas, and I'm like, hell yeah. And then I'm like, I don't want to do this. And she's like, no, that was a good idea. Like, let's do it, you know? And so the lease for MasterPeace Studio was signed during Neon Babylon's, like, second year, and nobody knew, you know? I had did my first official collab with Global Goods, and we had already had a location for MasterPeace Studio, but I didn't tell anybody.
Sure.
But it was always meant to just like house creatives. It was always meant to like, how are we going to sharpen each other? How are we going to make Reno better?
Yeah.
And at the time I was like, I don't see anything like that here. You know what I'm saying? Where other creatives are engaging with each other in like a very honest and open way. Like, I don't see a lot of people that are like, who I consider thought leaders, being in the same room with each other.
Right.
From a creative standpoint. Like, I'm not talking about like politicians or people that, like, you know, are on boards and all that. Like, I don't care about that. Like, I was like, how do we get in touch with ground level people? Because those are the ones that really are going to move the needle going forward.
Yeah.
So that's really how MasterPeace Studios started, and that's why the initial space was so small, because it was just meant to be like a creative space.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Maybe like a conference room where you can bounce ideas off.
Exactly. But it was designed meticulously. Like, we poured over how we wanted to make this thing look, right? And it was like, this has to look and feel like it doesn't belong in Reno. And if we can't make people feel like that, then we have failed, right? And that's part of the process, right? Is how do you elevate certain things as well by example? It's one thing to just complain and say like, oh, this sucks, right? And it's like, well, what are you going to do about it? If you don't like the spaces you walk into, then create your own space. And that's literally what we did. And that was the feedback that we got from people when they walked in. it was like, where the hell are we?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It was like, this doesn't feel like it belongs here. So all the stuff that we were literally designing the space to be, people were coming in and affirming that without us telling them. There was just the feedback that we were getting. It was like, oh, this doesn't belong in Reno. Like, what the hell? Like, what is this, right? People were like, was it a store? No. Is it a studio? No. And it was like, well, what is it? I don't know. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, we were purposely making it vague because we didn't want to put it in a box.
Yeah, didn't want to label it.
Absolutely.
So people see it and take it as one way.
And that first year, luckily, I had gone on furlough. And without that, I don't think we even opened the studio because we were both working full-time jobs, which we still are. But, like, without having that time off, like, we put that whole thing together in a month because I had time. You know what I mean? And so from there, it was just kind of like off to the races.
Right.
You know, so that's really how MasterPeace Studio started. Not as a photography studio.
It was a creative space where people could bounce ideas.
Absolutely.
Because I get that same thing too. It's like whenever, because I do the same thing where I have ideas that just come to me, and I'm like, oh, these are going to be perfect, and I'll do the same thing. I'll bring it up to my wife, and she's like, huh, it does sound, but she doesn't fall in the creative space because she doesn't know much about that. Like where it's I talk about acting or doing something, and she's like, we can put a movie on if you want to. Like, you know, doesn't know that world or the industry. So I'll bring something up. I'm like, this is a good idea for this. And that's kind of how like the podcast came to be.
Yeah.
I also think the same thing because I love T-shirts. Like I love having T-shirts. So I'll think of this would be a cool T-shirt idea. Or I'll do something like that. And at one point it's like I wanted to do like a fitness T-shirt thing.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, this will be a cool idea. No idea where to start or what to do. So there's an Instagram page that's floating around somewhere. And it's like I haven't come back to it because didn't know where to start from it.
So exactly what you're saying is that was a big part of the process as well. So I think anything that we have done successfully, we have figured, like the thing is first is how do we solve X problem?
Yeah.
Right? It's okay to just do things just to do it. Right? That's totally fine. Maybe you're just gifted to just be like, all right, I'm going to make chairs today. And you know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
now you're
cool.
Bill Gates somewhere.
Exactly, right? But I know for me, it's always what problem are we solving? And my wife she loves the story component. You know what I mean? So it's like, if it has a story, then because we can build on something here. You know what I mean? And so to your point about like, I did this, but who was I supposed to learn from? Yeah. You know, like that was a big part of, again, why the studio existed, because I was thinking we had a kid now, like, and I was thinking about my 15-year-old self. And it was like, if I was 15 and I had a MasterPeace studio, maybe I don't leave Reno.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
You have people to learn from.
Exactly.
And
right.
It's the same thing.
Exactly. So it was about, if we're going to come back here, the goal was always to leave Reno better than we found it. You know what I mean? And so now there are kids that ask us for advice because they see somebody doing something that they want to do. Whereas before, we couldn't ask anybody. And the same thing now, like I think the type of studio or concept that we want to run, there's not really anybody that we can ask. So like we're learning in real time. Yeah. Because this thing has so many different like arms, you know what I mean? Whereas if we were in LA or New York or whatever, like it might be easy to find a mentor, like, you know what I mean? Whereas here, like, I feel like everything that's happening now, like we're doing all this stuff for our son's generation and the 20-year-olds and the college students and high school students, so they can look and see like, okay, I saw what they did, I'm gonna do this better, or I didn't like this or like that. Yeah. Whereas before, I'm like, we didn't have that, or at least I didn't have that for what I was looking for. And that's also a big part of why we're doing it and why we've been around for so long, is like there's something bigger than just photography here.
Yeah, you're learning on the job. It's the same thing. Like when I said the modeling thing that came up and there's not a lot of males, and I started doing it, and then my whole thing is just reaching out to photographers and seeing what I can do and, you know, figuring out what can happen. And then I've got shoots under my belt and things happen. Then now it's at a point where I will get messages from people sometimes. It's like, hey, so-and-so wants to get into modeling. How do they do that? I'm going to give them your information. Yeah. Like, sweet, send them over. Absolutely. And then I'll give them kind of a rundown. So it's the same thing. Going from trying to find a mentor to then becoming one.
Yeah, you're putting yourself in that position.
Exactly. So then you get those hours under your belt, and then now you can give that to people. And then, like how you were saying with the, you wanted to do the cop thing and detective and kind of think that stuff. What he was saying, now you got to find the story. How do we fix that? What do we do? Problem solving and going from there. And then now that the space has kind of become what you thought it would be, how is that going now with everything kind of more established?
I think this year is probably the changing point for our studio because we actually started shooting. So when we first opened up MasterPeace Studio, nobody was taking photos. Like him and I, we weren't photographers. Like I enjoyed photography, or I was like, oh, I can take pictures outside, but I just always got so anxious about photographing people and stuff. So,
Sure, yeah.
And then I had friends too that were also photographers, and I was like, dang it, like I don't want to like join in and be like, oh, I'm photographing too, because it's like I didn't want to seem like I was just jumping on the train. But this year it's a whole different ballgame because I think now that we're experiencing what it's like to be a photographer, we're now understanding what we need for our studio that could benefit other photographers.
Yeah.
So now there's kind of like that relation point because we know that, oh, that other studio space was way too small, or this angle doesn't work, or ceilings are too small. You know what I mean?
You
So
see
we're
things differently.
kind of seeing things a little bit differently and trying to bring in equipment that can really benefit somebody who wants to shoot in a studio. But I don't think leading up until we both started shooting last summer, or you were last summer and I started shooting in September. I have no idea before that we would be here today, because now we're like really trying to push like what are we going to look like as photographers, and then what is our studio going to look like as far as who we can offer this and cater to our city.
Yeah.
And the funny, the transition, so I say MasterPeace didn't start as a photography studio.
Yeah.
We had a backdrop in there because we wanted to incorporate elements of just all things creative, right? And so, again, we weren't shooting, but people loved the space so much they kept wanting to shoot in the studio, right? And funny enough, I mean, you guys can't see him, but Jay shot in our studio. That's how we met him. And mind you, we didn't know anything about umbrellas and lighting or whatever. So he shows up with this giant, like 7-foot umbrella, and we're like, holy shit, like this is not gonna go well. You know what I mean? And it was just like, and it was that one of those moments where it was just like, we don't know what we're doing here. You know what I'm saying? But this thing is evolving into a photography studio. And it was never designed to be that, but now we're getting outside interest to be like, hey, can I come shoot in your space, blah, blah, blah. And it was like, okay, we need to fix some things here. Like, and I think even like the outlet that we had, like, and I apologize now, like even to this day, like even the outlet that we had couldn't support the wattage of the strobe that he was shooting with. We didn't even know what strobes were, right?
Yeah.
Like,
no idea.
No, dude, like we were like, no, we are just curators, man. Like, you want to come shoot in the space? Cool, do what you do.
A plug over there.
Yeah, right. Like, this should work, right? And we had some photographers that were like around the space, but they more so shot with like LEDs and continuous. And so like, this professional photographer shows up with all of his stuff, and we're just like,
what is
like,
this world?
all right, like, you know what I mean? And he was very gracious, but I'm sure his friends like, what the fuck? Like, where am I at? Like, you know what I mean? Because it was like his umbrella literally took up the entire room, and it was like, now shooting, I would be so pissed if I walked into a space, right? And I'd be like, why am I here? Like, you know what I mean? That's how I would feel. But it's like my wife is saying, like, now that we're shooting, we ran the studio for 2.5 years without ever picking up a camera in a serious capacity.
Yeah.
Right? So things that photographers need, you don't know. And it's almost like you can't teach somebody how to like be a good parent unless you're a parent yourself. So like all your friends that don't have kids give you advice, you're like, yo, shut up. Like you don't know. Like,
know nothing
and it's
about
like,
it.
don't give your kids an iPad. Do you have a kid? No, then shut up. Like, you know what I mean? Because it's like you just don't know what that feels like in that moment. And until we started shooting and understanding how lighting worked and how, like you said, angles worked and how spacing worked. And it was like, we appreciate everybody like shooting in that first studio and being patient with us, because we literally had no idea what we were doing.
Yeah.
Because it was never designed to be that.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? But now we've taken more of like a presence in the education. And now it's like, oh, okay, like now we know how to make these things comfortable for other people coming in and visiting the space and
Better
and all of that. But like, yeah, I wanted to bring that story up because I was like, I still think about that to this day sometimes where I'm just like.
But the
What the
photos
hell?
you took of our space.
Oh yeah, we still
are
use
still
those
my
to this
favorite
day.
till
So
this day.
that was a trade off. It was like, let me use your space
was
and I'll
like,
take
oh, I love
photos of
this.
your space.
Yeah.
And so like, cause I don't know if you still like real estate photography at the time.
It
And I'm
was
looking at
nice.
you like, he's not on camera, but I'm sorry. But you know what I mean? But it's like, so we're like, oh yeah, like take pictures of the space, and the pictures came out incredible. We still use them
We
to this
love
day.
them.
But yeah, we got more out of that deal than he did in that moment. But it was just part of the growing pains, right? And now we kind of understand what to do and what not to do, and we're constantly trying to be better now that we have an understanding of what photographers need, because now we know what we need. You know what I mean? And she went from like, I'm shooting to like completely out of here. So even to that degree, it's like things that we want to buy equipment wise may not even be what a beginner photographer needs, but we have it because we're trying to elevate ourselves. You know what I mean? But again, and if we didn't start shooting, probably wouldn't be that way.
Yeah, it's
you know?
it's the learning on the job aspect.
Absolutely.
And we are learning all the time because even people will call me out too. Like I did a post recently for my birthday, and this photographer reached out and he's like, hey, I'm sorry if I'm out of line, but you're not using your C-stand correctly or the boom's wrong. And I was like, yeah, it's probably wrong because I never looked at it. I just put it together.
I tried it.
Or even like we'd had like some really like established photographers come in and like we have this pulley system for our backdrops. He's like, hey, you know this is wrong. I'm like, no, because in 2 years no one's ever said it was wrong.
Yeah.
Dude.
How am I supposed to
And I'm like, no.
And that's why it's important to have people that are experienced or have mentors or have OGs or whatever you want to call it, just somebody that can teach you, right? Because similar to having somebody bring in a 7-foot umbrella that doesn't fit in your space, we were also using equipment in an improper way and probably like breaking it or not getting as much life out of it because we just didn't know. You know, and then I got to the point where I was like mad at our like photographer friends. I'm like, none of you told us this. Like, this stranger came in here and was just like, hey, like, you know, I really like you guys. I just want you guys to know, like,
it should
that's
be
not right. Like, because we would have listen, so the backdrop issue, it was we would use like clamps to hold the backdrop, like the chain in place. And so we would like hold it, and then we'd have to like, it would have to be like a 2-man thing. You would hold the chains, and then like, all right, grab the end of the backdrop so it doesn't keep rolling down, and like put the clamps on it and all that. And he was like, you guys are doing this all wrong. And he was like, hey, you see these little notches? They fit right in. And he was like, you see this little button? It locks us. And then we're like, are you kidding me, dude? Like,
and you think we would have utilized YouTube to figure this out, but we're like,
sometimes
it looks simple.
We don't know.
Fine, I can do it.
Yeah.
No big deal.
I mean, it worked, right, for at least a solid 2 years, and nobody said anything until this year.
And he came in and he changed our whole.
I'm
we were just
so
like,
embarrassed.
I can't believe this, man. Like,
I think what comes with it too is like while you're learning and figuring things out, being humble enough to take advice from people coming. Well,
absolutely.
I was having a conversation because learning on the job, because my day job is being an electrician.
Yeah.
Right. So you learn as you go, and then you want to figure out power and wattages and all that stuff. And we were talking. It was like, well, one guy never takes the criticism. Because if you're doing something wrong, he won't own up and say, no, I'm doing it right. What are you talking about? Doesn't take ownership of it. But you have to have that humbleness, be like, if I'm doing this wrong, tell me.
Please.
And then I'll fix it.
Please.
I don't, oh, you're not going to hurt my feelings.
Right.
Because this is wrong.
Yeah.
This is wrong? Oh, shit, let me go fix it.
Yeah.
Like, just tell me how to, and then you can make it better, and then it grows, and then now you do it all the time.
We would much prefer that interaction of like, tell us directly, because we're never going to look down on somebody for being like, hey, like that's not the correct way.
Yeah.
Oh, we want to do things the correct way.
Yeah.
Just don't go run and tell a million people and be like, yo, don't go to MasterPeace because they don't know how to use
They didn't
backdrops.
use the
Like,
C
you know what I
stereo.
mean? Like, and it's like, no, like I appreciate the people that can come to you in your face and say like, hey, like you guys can do this better. And we're always going to be like, you're probably right.
Sweet.
All right,
Yeah.
cool. Thank you. We'll fix it today. Like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Because at the end, it's not about our egos. It's about MasterPeace Studio is a community-based place. Like, you know what I mean? So we're trying to get into the education aspect as well. And if we don't know, we're also going to be teaching a bunch of other people the wrong way.
Yeah.
So if somebody knows the correct way, please give the
Tell
information.
me,
You know
yeah.
what I mean? Because we're never going to take it personal if you're trying to improve it. If somebody's like, yo, you guys are stupid, that's one thing,
Yeah.
right? Like if it's like,
That's not-
hey, like
that's not the right way.
you're probably breaking a lot of those, like I don't even know what the things are called. And we're like, yeah, right? And he's like, here's why they're breaking because you're doing it wrong. You
And
know?
then now you don't have to shell
Exactly.
out money for
Exactly.
one every time.
Exactly. So
That makes sense. So now, as we're kind of coming to the close of this, you've got things going on, you're learning, you're getting everything ready. What is next for you guys? Do you have, always throwing the spaghetti against the wall and see what's sticking? Do you have something that's next? Do you have an idea? Are you working
Yes.
on
I
something?
feel like we
what
have
do
two
you got
different
going?
answers, so I'll let you go
Oh.
first.
Oh,
No,
okay.
we may not. But.
No, so this past year we actually moved into our old suite. So the first studio that we have, there was 2 other rooms that were like adjacent to that room, and so we've moved 3 times on the same level, but 3 times. So we got the 2 rooms because it just made more sense for space and a little bit more room. So we had 2 studios, and then I think 2 months ago we acquired our very first studio. So now we have the whole suite. So it's
Yeah.
like full circle now. And so I think over the last year and a half, when we transitioned to more of a photography studio, sorry, I stumbled, of a photography studio.
That's right,
I
it's like,
stumble sometimes, or I stutter. Don't.
that's where we keep the light beers here.
But I think we kind of lost our soul a little bit because we were looking too much towards the
business
business
side.
aspect.
Yeah.
But the culture and the aesthetic and the presence that we had really kind of, detached or drifted away. And so we kind of recognized that this past year. So when we got the opportunity to take our old space, we were like, yes, let's take that old space. So we have it now. We have done nothing with it, but there's a plan to do something with it. And it's to kind of convert it back to what that was. But we really want to incorporate more of, all things art related. So not just the photography piece, but music, galleries, artworks, and really cater to, that creative demographic. In addition to also having a photography studio. Because now we'll have a photography studio. We'll have a kind of set studio where we'll have built sets already. And then we'll have our original studio where we'll facilitate more of like the galleries and some retail and
Right.
and stuff like that.
Because it's the same thing, as you said, where it's like all of the creative aspects. That's kind of the idea behind, like the show here too. It's like showing we had, you guys that own a studio yesterday, we had an actor who mainly does stunts. Then the couple days before, we had a country music singer come in who's a local guy who does country music. And then it's like just getting the different facets of all of the creativeness is kind of what this show's all about too. It's like so people know and can hear about people's stories and what they can do and then help everybody grow. Yeah. And it's amazing.
And I think a big part of our story, and I think why people connect with us, is we don't mind being vulnerable. I think a lot of business owners, especially in social media age, you're always showing your highlights. You're always showing how great things are, and people don't talk about the struggles. Yeah. Like, they don't talk about your mental health as a creative. They don't talk about, we should be getting paid more. Like, these conversations all happen, on a level, but they're not spoken about out loud. Right. And I think we try to do a good job of advocating, no, speak up. You know what I mean? So, I will be the first to admit, that first studio, outside of bringing big like equipment in, like it was perfect for what we were trying to establish.
Right.
Right. And where it got muddied was, okay, there's money to be made in renting out our studio space.
Mm-hmm.
So then it became about that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think that, as my wife was saying, we started drifting away from the initial problem we were trying to solve, and being like, we have a space that you can rent out as a studio. And then it just became about like chasing that. You know what I
Chasing the
mean?
dollars, yeah.
And it was like, we were just going so far away, or veering away from why people loved our space to begin with. Like, and when we first opened, people were coming in every single weekend just to talk. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
In our new space, our second space that we moved into after the initial like 2019, 2020, it wasn't really set up like that. And it was very transactional, right? Like people would come in and they would love the space because of the design, right? But there wasn't that element of like, hang out, kick it, let's talk, or whatever. It was like, you come in, do your shooting, you leave.
It was business.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so it was like, because that was never our true intention, it just started feeling like, what are we doing, right? And so, and it was actually, my wife was the one that brought it up. Like when we got our third move, right, in the same kind of like pad as the original space. So now we occupy like 4 suites within it. So we have like the whole area to ourselves, right? It was like, she said like, yo, it doesn't feel the same in here anymore. You know what I mean? It doesn't feel the same as 2020.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like we're a part of any community any longer. Like we're just a photography studio. You know what I mean? And it's like, then what's the difference between us and any other photography studio that's out there? Like, you know what I mean? It's
Goes
like,
back to what you were saying too, where you're in the business class and they're talking the corporates. It feels more corporate than the creative.
Absolutely, right? And it was like, nope, we need to go back to our essence, right? So now I think we can really design the spaces to their full potential, right? So as my wife was saying, we're now going to have our original space back where we can really tap back into why we had this in the first place.
Yeah.
But we also have other spaces in there where those are still available. And those things don't have to intersect, right? But I think it's important to showcase all of it so people do understand, like, this is not just a regular photography studio.
Yeah.
And it was never designed to be that way. And I think the messaging got lost because for a year and a half, that's all it was. It was just a photography studio.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So people that are fans of MasterPeace Studio that have never shot in there, it's because of that first year. You know what I mean? It's that first year of building with people, and they just love what we were doing, but they're not photographers, they're not models. So they don't come in the space anymore because it's like, well, why would I? I'm not booking a shoot.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so it's like, now it's like, okay, now we tried, you know, it's like you make your first album and it's perfect, and then the second album you're trying to make money, and then it flops, and you're like, what the hell? Because you were chasing money.
Yeah.
And now on your third album, it's like, I relate everything to music. I'm sorry, like it's just whatever, right?
And
it's
talked
like,
about a musician.
you know what I mean? Like,
It
so
makes sense.
it's like, you know, now it's like, okay, now I can figure out how to merge these two things because I have the experience and the information.
Yeah.
Like, now how do we make MasterPeace Studio what it was, but elevated 10x, 20x, whatever.
Right.
And so, you know, that is where the future of the studio is going to go, is going back to merging both of those ideas of having a space that people can rent out and come and learn, and it still be affordable, because we still want to reach those kids that want to be creative and may not have the equipment and may not have the finances. And we don't want that to be the barrier of entry. We want to keep elevating the community.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we also want to be able to showcase art and showcase fashion and showcase music and have a library and have all of these things. And now we really have the space to do it. But now we're really holding down full-time crazy jobs, and our son is getting older, and it's like we don't have as much time anymore. But we do have friends that want to help out, so like we got to lean on that a little bit more. But I think within the next few months, MasterPeace Studio is going to be the best that it has ever been.
Yeah.
And we're going to treat it that way. And, we'll see how the community responds to it, Yeah.
You think about, like he was saying, it was like what worked for you, what works for them, and now you got to find that middle ground, which it seems like you've got the right path that you're going for from it. And
Hopefully.
so now we're going to get you guys out of here.
Okay.
Okay.
I want to say thank you for coming in, telling your story, and it sounds really exciting. Before we do let you guys go ahead and promote your social medias one more time where we can find everything, and people can follow and tag. And all that.
So our studio page is MasterPeace, so MasterPeace, PACE.studio. And that's where you can find like our links to book our services or the studio itself. And then my individual, it's like my personal page turned photography page. But it's __ hi Felicia __. And that's where you'll find all my latest and greatest new photography photos that I'm doing.
All the good stuff.
All the fun stuff.
My personal / business is neonbabylon.rno, and that page, I don't know what it is at this point. It's just a living
there.
mood board, because it went from clothing to photography, and now everything is sprinkled in. You're gonna find my wife, myself, my son. You might find a shirt. You might find
It's you.
it's just me, right? And so like that's who we are. That's our socials, and we are available. So
Perfect. Well, once again, thank you guys for coming in. You guys heard it here. Remember, for us too, Stephen Longley, Longley's Line Lifestyle Studio here. We'll talk to you guys next week.
Bye.
Cool. Thanks,
Yay.
guys.
that was
Thanks.
good. That was cool.